Hi, I'm Em, aka Meema Makes. I'm a crochet designer, knitter and a content creator based in the UK, and this is my monthly podcast where I talk about everything that I've been crocheting and knitting in the last month. That's finished projects, works in progress, and in this episode I'm going to be talking about 5 sweater patterns that I plan on casting on this year. I'm also going to be revealing the next crochet along blanket, and it's a really exciting collaboration. So I'm going to be putting some timestamps down here so you can jump around to the bits of the video if you're not interested in knitting and crochet. You only, for example, want to see the crochet along blanket announcement. You can find those timestamps down here. If you are planning to watch the whole episode, it's probably going to be a long one, so grab yourself a cuppa and get comfy. Before we move on to my finished projects, just a little bit of self-promotion. The Sunflower Squish blanket pattern and free video tutorial went live 2 weeks ago, and the crochet along is well underway. Thank you to everybody who has watched the tutorial, who has bought the pattern or the yarn pack and is joining in the crochet along. I am loving seeing the start of your blankets, and I cannot wait to see all these finished squishy sunflower blankets. It's not too late to join in the crochet along if you want to, so I'll pop a link down in the description if you're interested. Now it's time to get started with my projects. So my first finished object, you saw in the introduction, it was the shawl that I was wearing, but this project needs a little bit of context and introduction before I show the project. So this is a project using a yarn advent. If you've not heard of a yarn advent before, it's where usually a hand dyer puts together a collection of 24 mini skeins of yarn. So in my case, I had 20 gram mini skeins of 4-ply or fingering yarn, and they put 24 together, individually wrap them, and then you open one for every day of the advent. These collections of yarn usually have a theme or a mood board attached to them, and the one that I chose in 2023 was a Jane Eyre advent by Adventures in Yarncraft, and I'll put up her mood board here. It was a really beautiful, cool and moody colour palette, and it wasn't necessarily colours that I would usually choose, like blues and purples and greys. I tend to lean towards those warmer autumnal colours and pinks. So it was kind of like me getting, dipping my toe in something new, trying things outside of my comfort zone. And I'm so glad I bought this yarn advent. I will put a picture of the yarn up here when I'd laid them all out so you can see all of the colours that I was working with. They did form a fade that was sort of rainbowy, but not really, but the knitted shawl is definitely rainbowy. So the pattern that I chose for my yarn is the Find Your Fade shawl by Andrea Mowry, and that shawl pattern isn't designed specifically for yarn advents because the colour changes are for sort of full skeins of sock weight yarn. So I followed some notes on a Ravelry project by Georgie from Fibre, who is also a yarn dyer in the UK, and I followed her notes to sort of convert the Find Your Fade pattern into one that accommodates those 24 colours with this sort of like the fade of the colour changes. So I will try and show you the whole shawl, but it is not going to fit on the screen. So I'll try and put some footage in a little bit later when I'm talking about it. So at the end of the last podcast, I talked a little bit about my yarn advent and my plans, and I showed you this little grey triangle that I had cast on. So I'd knitted up to about here. And through January, I could not put this project down, and I finished it within I think 3 or 4 weeks. So I knitted all the way through the fade. We've got whites going into some lovely pinks, and then some browns with sort of like this gold colour, and I was really worried that that gold doesn't really sit in the fade as well as that pink, but I think with this pattern I managed to get it to sort of work within that fade. And then through the browns into sort of these soft greens. They come across a bit grey on camera, but there's some lovely soft greens here. Then into blues, and finally out of my comfort zone, purples here. You can see that's the cast off edge there. So this is the side of the knitting, and that is my cast off edge, and that is supposed to be straight, but you can see my little lump there. That's supposed to be a straight edge and it's not. So I've done something wrong at my cast off, but it doesn't matter. This shawl is giant. It is giant. I can properly wrap myself in it. It's so colourful as well. When I looked at the fade, it felt really muted and cool and gloomy. But as soon as I knitted it up, just this bit just really surprised me with how it kind of is like a soft rainbow. This project really surprised me. because I wasn't expecting it to be so rainbowy and colourful at the end, but I love it. I've worn it out and about a few times instead of a scarf. I have not blocked it. I washed it and then I sort of hung it on my clothes dry because I spilt tomato soup on it as I was casting off. So I furiously washed it, and it hasn't stained at all, which is great. So it hasn't stained, but so I sort of washed it and then hung it over an air dryer, and then I finished the cast off. And I haven't blocked it or washed it since. It smells kind of like a mixture of, you know, that woolly smell you get, and my perfume. So yeah, I really, really love this. I'm so glad that I knitted it. I found it really mindful and relaxing because it's a lot of rows of garter, as well as these sort of like areas of like a really simple lace stitch, which gives you a bit of variation. And I couldn't put this down. I was like knitting and I was like, oh, I want to get to the bit where I add the next colour and add the next colour and add the next colour. And I was just like, I couldn't put it down. So this was sort of my primary project in January, and I'm really grateful for it. And I'm really grateful that I had such a colourful project for January, because I get a bit of SAD, like seasonal affective disorder. Like January and February, I always feel really down, and this really, really helped. Like just the colours of it. Yeah, so I really, really love this project. I would definitely recommend this shawl pattern. It uses up quite a lot of yarn. It's on 3.5mm needles, so even though it's like sock yarn, it knits up quite quickly. Yeah, would definitely recommend the pattern. The yarn isn't available. I've had a few people ask me where they can get the yarn. It's a pre-order advent, so it's no longer available. But you can sort of like order advents earlier in the year. You sort of pre-order them and then they come in December. You sort of pre-order them in the summer and they come in December. It's a little bit early, but I'm ready to pick my yarn advent for next year. I'm hooked. I can see why people do yarn advents every year. Yeah, I'm hooked. I think next year I'm going to get a double knit yarn advent so that I can crochet with it, because I think I'd really love to do like a crocheted, either like a cardigan or a jumper or a blanket with like maybe patchwork squares, a little, maybe, I don't know. But I think I'm going to go for a double knit one next year. They are quite pricey. I think mine was, I did 6 payments of £25 over 6 months. So that's £150 total. But I have a lot of yarn left. I'm going to get multiple projects from it. I've got a lot of yarn left, as you can see. It's all just sort of thrown in there, and I have got my stitch markers are on a project. I'll show you the stitch markers. But yeah, so I was kind of like, I didn't really know what to do with this box of sort of leftovers, but I've since started another project using sock yarn that I will talk about in the works in progress section of this video. So the leftovers from this shawl and from that project, I'm thinking of crocheting a grandmother's flower garden quilt, but a crocheted version. So grandmother's flower garden quilt is like fabric hexagons that you sew together into these flower shapes, and then you lay them out then it's called grandmother's flower garden quilt pattern. It's quite a popular old pattern from like the 1930s, I think, and a lot of people do like variations of it now, and I love them. I really love them, but I know that I will never like do a sewn hexagon blanket because you need to do it by hand, so I know that I won't. So what I've thought to do instead is to use my scraps of sock yarn to make one, basically, and I can make the little flowers over several years and then sew all the flowers together. So I've got a hexagon thing, and this is sort of the little hexagon that I've mocked up. It's got a little flower in the middle. I didn't just want a solid one. So this won't be a pattern anytime soon because I'm not starting it until probably summer to autumn, once I've got some more scraps built up, and then I'll do a tutorial for it. But yeah, I'm really excited to make a blanket of these teeny tiny hexagons from sock yarn scraps. So that was we went off on a bit of a tangent there about what I'm doing with my yarn scraps from this project. So my next finished object is a pair of socks. So these socks, I'll talk about the yarn first. So the yarn is from Beehive Yarns, who is a hand dyer here in Yorkshire, and she is my favourite hand dyer. I love her colours, especially her pinks. So this is the Flower Crown sock set on her Darling DK base. So this is a double knitting weight pair of socks. I used a 3.25mm needles and I did them toe up. So the sock set was 100 grams of Flower Crown, which is this main colour, and 20 grams of this contrast colour. So the main colour is called Flower Crown. It was one of her colours that came out like last spring, I think. And then the toes and the heels are in Cozy Up, which is one of her dye to order tonals, but I did buy this as like 100 grams plus 20 grams sock set together. I have knit double knit socks before. The first pair of socks I made years and years ago were actually double knit, but I haven't recently. I think I prefer making sock weight socks, but I don't know if it was just this yarn I didn't get on with. So this is a lovely yarn. It feels really well. It feels really nice. It has fantastic stitch definition, but for a sock yarn, it's quite round and it's not very elastic. And I like my sock yarns to be a little bit more elastic. And because of that roundness and the lack of elasticity, it meant that I couldn't do my usual short row heel, which is what I like to do when I have contrast heels. Instead, I had to put in an afterthought heel, and I don't like how an afterthought heel fits. So I'm not massively happy with the fit of this sock because it's quite tight across the instep. So I don't think I'll be using the Darling DK sock base again, but I'm open to trying other double knit sock bases. If you have any suggestions and you're a sock knitter, please let me know down in the description. I'm thinking of trying Coop Knits socks in their DK weight because I really like their sock weight yarn. That's like it's not hand dyed one though. They have some nice heathered colours. I knit a pair of sock weight socks in their yarn, so I'm thinking about trying their double knit ones. I'm not planning on casting on another pair of socks soon anyway. So the yarn colours, the Flower Crown colour is beautiful. Look, it's like this pale pink with all of these speckles of reds and oranges and greens and black in there. There's purple in there. Oh, it's so nice. I love speckled yarn. You can see here how here it looks like the speckles are sort of in stripes, but then up here they're less stripy. I love knitting with hand-dyed yarn because you kind of don't know what you're going to get when you knit it up. Well, you kind of do, so you can see it, but it just makes me want to knit more because of that variation. Like even the solid colours, so this is like the tonal for the toe. I don't know if you can see in the heel. There's like variation in the depth of the colour. So some bits are darker and some bits are lighter. And I just love that. It's like semi-solid. There's not a lot else to say about it. I knit them a little bit too long. I'm a size 7 in the UK, which I think is like a 40 or a 41 in European sizes. So my toe is a little bit baggy on the end, but that doesn't matter. It just means I get more toe room. So yeah, those are those socks. And then the final finished project I have to show you is a cardigan. So my final finished project, I'm calling it finished because the knitting is finished, but I haven't woven in the ends, I haven't sewn on the buttons, and I haven't blocked it, and it needs all 3 of those before I can wear it. I'll try and wear it in the next podcast. That's my plan anyway. So it's a cardigan, and it's a cabled cardigan. Look at those cables. So I think it's called a horseshoe cable here, where I've got like two cables going in opposite directions right next to each other. I think it's called a horseshoe cable. So this cardigan pattern is called the Egwene Cardigan by Fable Knitwear. Helena of Fable Knitwear. She calls it Fable and not Fable, so I'm going to call it Fable Knitwear. And her designs are beautiful. They're quite feminine and elegant with a bit of a vintage touch. Like some of her cardigans have these little puff sleeves, and like the silhouettes are beautiful. And I really want to knit like every one of her patterns, but I'm holding myself back. I'll talk about the one that I'm planning in the section at the end of this video where I talk about my planned projects, but this is one of her sort of like plainer or more traditional cardigans without that vintage flair. So this is a bottom up cardigan with raglan shaping for the arms, and it's got cables on the body, and then the arms are just plain stockinette, and these are knit bottom up as well. You start at the bottom of the body, and then you work up to your armpit, and then you knit the 2 sleeves cuff up to the armpit, and then you join it all in the round, and then you do all your raglan decreases. And I had not seen a bottom up cardigan come together before, and it was such an interesting construction. I really enjoyed seeing it sort of all suddenly come together into a cardigan shape. And I really love knitting the cables. I feel like mastered cables last year. I did a couple of small cable projects, and I wanted to make a cardigan. I love cardigans and jumpers with cables. I really love it. And now I feel like I've got them. I'm like, okay, I want to make this and this and this and this. And then I chose this pattern because I had this yarn in stash. So the yarn is Drops Nepal in shade light beige. And I used 14 50-gram balls of it to make this cardigan. I've got one ball left, I bought 15. I bought it for another jumper. I bought it to hold double with another yarn, and then I got this yarn, held it double, did a swatch and didn't like it. So this has been in my stash for quite a few months. And I'm like, I need a pattern to use up this yarn. And then I discovered Fabric Knitwear, and I was just going through all of her patterns on Ravelry, and I was like, that one. I just immediately knew that pattern was going to be that matched this yarn, and it's really lovely cardigan. It needs blocking, as if you've knitted cables before, they need blocking to sort of stretch them out and make them pop a bit, because currently this cardigan doesn't fit me because it's too tight, because that the cable's kind of like ribbing. I mean, if you look on the inside, it looks like ribbing, so it needs to, I can't hold this up anymore, it's making my arms hurt. So it needs to stretch and sort of relax a bit. So it really needs blocking for me to get the width, but I have tried it on and stretched it and it does fit me, but it needs a really aggressive block first, which is why I've not woven any of the ends in, because I want to block it before I weave my ends in, because it's going to be such an aggressive block. I've also got buttons. Let me grab the buttons. I'll show you the buttons I got. I bought them from Woolly Tangle, and I'll show you some other things that I got from the Woolly Tangle earlier. So these are the buttons that I bought. Let me just hold it up like on it. So these are the buttons I bought. They're just like plain wooden buttons, but they're quite a warm wood colour, and I think it went really nicely with the beige of the cardigan. Beige is not usually my colour. I tend not to go for neutrals, but I do wear neutrals a lot. So I have got like a beigey coloured cardigan anyway, so this will replace it. Sorry, my cat is like, looks like she's going to be naughty down here. My cat is really energetic, so I'm like watching her sniff around the base of my tripod, and I'm scared she's going to knock it. Okay, I think she stopped now. She just made me really worried then she was going to knock my camera over. What was I saying about this cardigan? I feel like today my brain's all over the place, so I'm sorry if this podcast comes across as all over the place and really disorganised, but it's because my brain is disorganised at the minute. So yeah, that is the cardigan. I think I've said everything I wanted to say about it. I will link to the Ravelry project down in the description, and then you'll be able to find the yarn and the pattern details there, because I'm finding that my descriptions are too big now for my podcast. So I'm just going to be linking to the projects, and then you'll have to go via the project to find the pattern if you're interested in knitting this, rather than directly linking to the pattern anymore, because I just don't have space in the description. So yeah, so that's my Egwene cardigan. I will try and wear it in my next podcast so we can see it in all its glory once it's been blocked and spread out. So let's move on to my works in progress. I've got two. One is a jumper, and I've got a lot to say about yarn on that jumper. And then the other one is the crochet along blanket, and I think I'm going to start with that because that is the most exciting thing. So back in December, I got contacted by the organiser of Yorkshire Yarn Fest and asked me to design a crochet along blanket for Yorkshire Yarn Fest. I'm a massive fan of Yorkshire Yarn Fest. I've been twice. It's my favourite yarn festival that I've been to. They focus really heavily on like accessibility. So like the next one that's coming up in November that I'm doing the crochet along blanket for, it's actually got kind of like a slot, like a quiet slot for people with additional needs, so they can go and it's sort of less busy and it's a lot quieter, and that's really helpful for someone who uses a wheelchair. I went to Yarndale last year and in my wheelchair, and I got stuck so many times. I'm never going back to Yarndale. It was horrible. And I've been there as like an able-bodied person and loved it, but as a wheelchair user, no. I'm a part-time wheelchair user. If I feel like that's out of context if you're new here. I'm a part-time wheelchair user. I have chronic illnesses, so I have to use a wheelchair when I'm out and about. And when I went to Yarndale, it's in like this like farm market shed thing. and there's just gutters, and my wheelchair kept getting stuck in them. And Yorkshire Yarn Fest is in this beautiful venue that's used for weddings, and it's got these beautiful beams and like fairy lights and just a flat wood floor, and it's a dream to shop at. It's a fairly small venue, everyone's really friendly, there's different sections. I love Yorkshire Yarn Fest. And then I commented saying, oh, I'm so excited. And she sent me a message like, would you be interested in doing a crochet along? And I was like, yes, I would. So we had a bit of a brainstorm session in January. And the blanket that I'm going to do is inspired by Yorkshire, mainly the Yorkshire countryside, but a couple of the squares are just as Yorkshire in general. And the one that I'm making at the minute is in hand-dyed sock yarn, but I'm also going to be making one in double knit yarn as well. So when we brainstormed a few different ideas, and what I settled on was a sampler blanket. So I've designed 12 different granny square patterns inspired by Yorkshire. Let me just grab my little design notebook that I've got. So I'll just read you out some of my brainstorm ideas for squares. So I've designed 12 granny squares, I've said that already. So I've designed 12 granny squares, and here are some of my ideas. The Bronte sisters, sheep, Yorkshire dales, autumn leaves, mill wheels and like smoky chimneys, cuppa, as in a cup of Yorkshire tea. There's all sorts on here, wildflowers, the Yorkshire rose, waterfalls like Gordale Scars, one of my favourites, and Malham Cove. So that's kind of like what I'm drawing inspiration from, is sort of Yorkshire, but the colours I'm using are not Yorkshire. So before I show you some of my square designs, I'll put up the colours that I've chosen here. So these are mini skeins, mainly from my stash, but I did order a few of the green ones to show in there. So these mini skeins are mainly from Beehive Yarns. I bought a couple of mini skein packs last year, so that's the same sort of mini skeins that I used for this shawl. So there's 20 gram skeins of sock yarn. Like I said, I am going to be making a second blanket in double knit yarn that's commercially available for people whose, hand-dyed yarn is out of your budget. So it's not excluding you because you can't afford, or you don't like hand-dyed yarn, or you don't want to make a blanket on a really small hook with sock yarn. You want to make a double knit blanket, which is my favourite way of making blankets. So I'm going to put together a few different like colour palettes and things of all different yarns so everyone can join in. And the way that this is going to work is essentially we're going to have some online events with me and I think her name's Sophie, who that's really bad, so I can't remember her name, but the organiser of Yorkshire Yarn Fest. We're going to have a couple of like online meet and greets or live streams during the start of the crochet along, the end of the crochet along, and then I'm going to have an in-person one at the end of the crochet along on one of the evenings of the weekend of Yorkshire Yarn Fest. You don't have to come to any of these to join in the crochet along. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to release one square pattern a week over 12 weeks, and then we'll have like 2 or 3 weeks to join them together and 2 or 3 weeks for the border, and that will probably run from July, I think, or maybe June, until Yorkshire Yarn Fest, which is at the beginning of November. I'll pop a link to Yorkshire Yarn Fest down below, but you don't have to be going to Yorkshire Yarn Fest to join in the crochet along. The pattern will be available online. Some of the events will be, so like the live streams and the sort of Zoom call meetups will be online as well. So yeah, you can join in anywhere in the world, and the squares I've tried not to make too Yorkshire specific. They're sort of more countryside themed, so it's not like if you have never been to Yorkshire and Yorkshire means nothing to you, then you can still sort of join in and relate anyway, because like there's one inspired by fields of wheat, for example, or by moorland, or there's one that's a flower or a meadow. So they're kind of like a bit more general as well. Should I start showing you some of the square designs? So yeah, so I've mocked up 11 of the 12. I've changed my mind about one of the squares, the Fields of Gold one. I've changed my mind about that, so I won't show that. But I've mocked up the other 11, well, I have done the 12th square, but I'm going to change it. The other 11 squares in just scraps of double knit yarn, just so I could get the pattern sort of down. And I took a bunch of notes, and now I'm writing them up, sort of typing them up and making them in the mini skeins of yarn at the same time. So I won't show you all 12 squares in this episode. I'll show you a few, but I kind of don't want to ruin the surprise just yet. I kind of want to reveal them bit by bit. So this first one here, this is called Moorland, and I've used some textured double knit stitches to represent the grass, and then these bubbles sort of represent that fluffy heather. Well, it's not really fluffy if you touch it, but represent heather. And then I'll just grab the one in hand-dyed yarn so you can see what it looks like in hand-dyed yarn as well. Sorry, I haven't cut these yet from the yarn because I don't know if I'm going to add another round or not. So here is the Moorland square. You can kind of see that lacy textured stitch there, and then the bobbles. So the idea of these squares is they're going to start easy and get more and more difficult as you go, and we're going to learn new stitches as we go and new techniques as well. So it's sort of like it starts off very beginner friendly and slowly adds in stitches and things till we get to the more complicated squares. It's probably going to be an intermediate level pattern to start with, and some of the squares will be more advanced. But if you're a determined beginner who's got, say, a granny square blanket under your belt and you're like, I'm confident, I want to learn new things, then this will be for you. But it's not going to be as beginner friendly as all of my other crochet alongs so far have been aimed at beginners. This one's sort of more improvers, intermediate crocheters, if that makes sense. So yeah, so I think this is one of the, I mean, it's pretty easy. The textured stitches is just double knit and the bubbles are cluster stitches. So there will be videos going through every single step of the square as well. As usual, there'll be a written pattern, a photo tutorial and a video tutorial, so you'll have lots of sort of resources to learn the new stitches. So yeah, that's the Moorland square. And then I'll just show you the ones in hand-dyed yarn rather than the acrylic ones, because the acrylic ones are a bit, some of them have got multiple colours in where I've put scraps together. So let's find another one that's gonna, yeah, this is one of my favourites. So this is the foxgloves square. Can you see there? That sort of 3D foxglove there? That's made from popcorn stitches, and it's so much easier to do. Like, popcorn stitches are just double crochet stitches. It's much easier to do than it looks. So yeah, and that's got sort of like 4 popcorn made foxgloves with a little stem and the leaves there. Like, this is not a too difficult square. The easiest square I'll show you next. This is the one that we're going to start with, and this is inspired by the Bronte sisters. And I took a trip to Bronte country for my 30th birthday. So it's kind of inspired by the Bronte sisters and their literature rather than like the Yorkshire countryside. So here we are. I don't know if you can see that lace pattern quite well there. So that's sort of like the lace pattern of the square. This is quite that's quite a dark colour, so it's quite hard to see that one. But yeah, so this is inspired by Victorian lace, as well as sort of like that Gothic archway shape of sort of the Gothic literature. The Gothic architecture even, not the literature, the Gothic architecture. So that's sort of the easiest one. And this one is just made using single crochets, double crochets and chains. So it's not too difficult, this one. So that's the one we're going to start with. And then, have I done the second one yet? So I realised I actually frogged my second one. So my second one is a watermill. This again is only double crochet, single crochets and chains. So that one's not too difficult to do either. You can see it's a nice circle. Like, Yorkshire has a lot of mills, especially West Yorkshire where I live. So I felt like I needed to put something to do with mills in the crochet along. And then the other thing that Yorkshire has a lot of is sheep. So where's my sheep square? So yeah, here. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this one because it's quite a dark burgundy brown colour, so I don't know how well that's going to come up. I'll try and bring it a bit closer. So if you can see here, I've got these 3 puff stitches. So this square is only using double crochets and puff stitches, I think. I think there might be single crochets in there as well. So yeah, and can you see those little clusters of puffs? Those represent sheep in a field. So this is my sort of like fields of sheep square. It's quite hard to see in that colour. I think I did my mock-up quite dark in that one as well. I'll show you one more, just one more. I don't know how many squares I've shown, but I'll just show you one more. I'll reveal all the squares in a separate video. So I'm getting a bit in a tangle now. So this one is inspired by the Yorkshire rose, which is like an emblem for Yorkshire, and it is like a 5-petaled white rose with gold leaves, I think, or gold. There's gold in there somewhere. But anyway, that's the wrong way. That's the top. So this is my Yorkshire rose square. You can see it's a 5-petaled flower. If we come out, it turns into a square. It was quite hard to work out how to turn 5 petals into a 4-sided square, but I did it. So that's the Yorkshire rose square. Shall I show you one more? I'll show you one of the complicated ones that's probably going to be one of the last squares that we do. I say complicated, this is probably about as complicated as it's going to get. So it is dark green, unfortunately, this one. This one's called A Walk in the Woods, and this is inspired by the Otley Shevin. So if you can see in the centre, we've got this cute little flower and there's some cluster stitches, and the cluster stitches go out. You can kind of see it there to the 4 corners, and those cluster stitches sort of represent paths through the wood. And then, I hope this comes across. I don't know if you can see that texture there, but I've used some front post stitches there. Are they front post stitches? I can't remember. I think they're front post stitches to make a tree. I don't know how well that's coming across on the green yarn. I've tried the squares that I've done so far, because I'm making them up and writing the pattern at the same time. I'm trying to use the dark colours and the heavily variegated colours, because we're going to be making 2 of each of the 12 squares to make 24 squares total. So the second time I make the square, I'm going to be taking photos for the photo tutorial, so I wanted to save the sort of like the lighter solid colours for when I do that. So these are all in quite hard to show ones, but like I said, I'll do a separate video where I talk about every single square and the inspiration behind each square as well. So yeah, so that's the Walk in the Woods square. So there's quite a lot here, and as you can see, although they are inspired by Yorkshire, you know, a lot of people relate to going for a walk in the woods, or, you know, fields of sheep. So I feel like I'm not just sort of like making it Yorkshire themed so much so that anyone who's never been to Yorkshire won't be able to join it, and it's sort of like a general sampler blanket as well. So the way that I'm making my first blanket, so my sock weight yarn blanket, is I'm using 24 mini skeins. So as if it was an advent, I'm going to, you know, I want this to be a pattern that can be used with a wide variety of yarns, and the one that I'm sort of doing first is an advent one. So in mini skeins, each square takes between 14 and 16 grams of sock weight yarn and a 2.75mm hook. I imagine most people will need a 3mm hook for this blanket though, because I found that crocheting at such a tight gauge with sock yarn, my tension has gone really loose, so I needed a 2.75mm hook, but you might need a 3mm hook. So it's quite a small gauge, but I'm hoping that then people can use this for their advent calendars, but also it's really annoying me that I don't know her name. I might look up. I don't know. I think it's Sophie. I'm so sorry if you're watching this and I can't remember your name. My brain's all over the place in a minute because we're about to move house. So I'm really sorry that I can't remember your name. So the lady that runs Yorkshire Yarn Fest, she said that what we're going to try and do and get the vendors that are going to be selling yarn at Yorkshire Yarn Fest to put packs together for the yarn. So yes, you can use 24 mini skeins from your stash, but I'm also going to do all of the maths so that if you want to use sock yarn, this is how many meters of colours you need. This is how many meters per square you're going to need. How many, you know, if you've got 50 or 100 gram skeins, how many of those you'll need. And then what I'm going to do is each of the squares is going to be surrounded by a border, and we're going to do join as you go. So if you remember, if you've been around Meema Makes for ages, this time last year I finished a sampler blanket. It went viral on Instagram and TikTok, and I got a little bit overwhelmed by all the love for it. So it was the sampler blanket made, I'll put some footage up, the sampler blanket made of acrylic yarn, and I used 48 or 49, I think, 49 different crochet square patterns that I found on Ravelry. So this blanket is inspired by that blanket, and I can't put out a pattern for that blanket because I used other people's patterns, if that makes sense. So I did a tutorial for the join as you go. So we're going to be using the same join as you go technique for this blanket, but I think the rounds are going to be a little bit different, but it's the same sort of join as you go technique. And then I'm going to design a similar border as well. And originally, I'll show you, I originally bought, on the advice of Sophie, I've literally got yarn everywhere. So on the advice of Sophie, I bought some undyed sock yarn from woolwarehouse.co.uk. This is Chester Wool's Platinum Sock. So I bought some undyed sock yarn. I didn't know how much I need, so I bought 4 skeins, which is going to be too much. I think I'm going to need about 2. But I bought undyed yarn, and I don't know, it doesn't come across on camera. This looks really lovely colour on camera, but in real life it's quite a yellowy cream because it's undyed sheep's wool. And I don't like it. Like, I want this to be accessible, and I'm talking about using undyed sock yarn. I want this to be accessible, but it just doesn't work. I tried it, it just doesn't work. So what I've done is I've contacted Beehive Yarns again. Of course I have Beth from Beehive Yarns on Instagram, and she really kindly sent me out some samples of her neutral coloured yarns. I won't show you them all, but this is the colour that I've settled on. It reminds me a little bit of Stylecraft Special Double Knit in Parchment. It's like a greyish off white. It's called Mouse Bite. It's one of her dyed to order tonals, and I actually put in my order for the blanket for this yesterday. If I hold that up next to the cream, hopefully you can see the difference in the colour. So this just felt a bit too bright for the colours that I've chosen, which are they are bright. I'll put a picture back up here. They are bright, but they're quite autumnal, and this just felt too much. It felt like it overwhelmed them, which you want a neutral to fade into the background. So yeah, so that is the neutral that I've chosen, and it's called Mouse Bite on her Audrey sock yarn base, which is what most of the minis I'm using are. So yeah, and once I finish this one, I'm going to make one in double knit as well. This crochet along isn't going to start until the summer, and it's going to run through till November. So I've got a fair amount of prep time, but I'm feeling the pressure of it a little bit because I'm not used to working to a deadline. So I am not crocheting anything else. This is my only crochet project, and I'm not allowed to start another crochet project until all of these squares are made and I'm joining. Once I'm joining, I'm allowing myself to start another crochet project. But I need this blanket to be finished. I've written up 10 of the 12 patterns. I haven't taken any photos, and I will do the video tutorials a bit closer to the time, and I will do the video tutorials when I do the double knit weight blanket. I'll film the video tutorials when I'm making that blanket, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'll try and put together some yarn palettes and yarn packs for it, so that you can sort of pick the colours that you like. Obviously, if you don't want to join in, you don't need to join in, but I think it's going to be a really fun blanket, and I'm really excited to see everybody's versions of it, the different colours that they use, how they get on with learning all the new stitches and the new squares, and I think it will be a really good way to introduce newer crocheters or people that don't necessarily crochet very much, like knitters, because predominantly hand-dyed. I was talking about this with, I'm going to be really silly if her name is not Sophie, with Sophie, and she was saying about how hand-dyed yarn is often marketed to knitters, and it's often marketed to knitters, but as crocheters we can use it too, but there's not a huge amount of patterns there. The lovely Tony from TL Yarncraft and Tipsy Tessie on Instagram, they both crochet with a lot of hand-dyed yarn as well. I'm sorry if you can hear crunching in the background, my cat's having a snack. So yeah, so I think that it's going to be really good pattern, not only for sort of improver crocheters, but for knitters who perhaps don't crochet as well, crochet very much, because it's going to sort of like show you what you can do with crochet and how versatile it can be in the different square patterns, but also nothing too complicated that is unachievable. I'm tried not to make the squares too complicated so that they're, people with different skill levels can make them, and the video tutorials will be fairly slow, and I will try and show like maybe the whole square. At the minute I just this is how we do one side of the square. I'll meet you back at the end of the round in my tutorials, but maybe I'll just crochet the whole square on camera for those that need it, because I want this to be accessible as well, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited. Yeah, I'm just really excited about it. It's I've not really done a proper collaboration before, and yeah, I'm just excited. I'm excited. The other thing to say is it will be a paid pattern. The pattern is already nearly 40 pages long, and that's not even got 2 of the squares on, so it's going to be quite a hefty pattern, but I'm going to release it week by week, so you'll get a new square pattern. And there is one thing I want to ask, I did ask this in the Meema Makes crochet community Facebook group as well, is what platforms do you like to use to get patterns on that aren't Ravelry? Because on Ravelry I can update the pattern, I can add, you can buy the pattern one time, this is going to be a paid pattern, so you can buy the pattern one time, and then every time I update the pattern or add an extra, you know, square to the pattern on Ravelry, it automatically updates in your library. But I only sell my patterns on Ravelry and Etsy at the minute, and I get a lot more sales on Etsy than I do on Ravelry. So with Etsy, you can't update the pattern. You just buy the pattern that's available at the time, and then if you need an updated version, you need to contact me and then I'll email it to you, because there's no way of doing that through Etsy. So what platforms that you know of can I use to sort of run the crochet along on for the people, because there's some people can't or won't use Ravelry. I know I spoke to somebody before who can't because Ravelry works on PayPal and they can't have a PayPal account. So yeah, what platforms do you use? So I'll stop talking about the Yorkshire Yarn Fest crochet along. At the minute, this is going to be called the Yorkshire Sampler Blanket. If anybody has any better names for it, I kind of like that it's just Yorkshire Sampler. I feel like, yeah, and I feel like I might even call it the Yorkshire Sampler / Advent Blanket. I don't know. So yeah, that's the Yorkshire crochet along. So yeah, I rambled a little bit there, I'm sorry. Like I said, my head is a bit all over the place. So we'll move swiftly on. I say swiftly, I've been rambling for like an hour now. So we'll move on to my next work in progress, and I'm just going to show you this really cute project bag. So I've been watching the Crayabaya knitting podcast from Rebecca up in Edinburgh, and I've watched a few of her back episodes, and she organises her project by having them in all these different colourful project bags, and then she has like this big basket that all of her whip bags go into, and I was like, do you know what? My works in progress are everywhere, and they're all in those like organza bags that you get yarn from Wool Warehouse, and each one of those is project. So what I've done is I've bought a few of these, I've got some more coming, and these bags are from the Woolly Tangle. I've used some of her yarns before. I used her yarn for my linen stitch scarf tutorial. Look how pretty this is. I know it's the wrong time of year for autumnal things, but autumn is my season. So yeah, it's autumnal. It was on sale. It was the last one and I couldn't resist. I bought another one as well. Let me grab that. I bought this one as well. It's a zip bag. There's no pockets inside, but it's got like interfacing and a lining. And I really like it. I feel like it's good quality. It fits a lot more yarn in than I thought it would. So I've ordered some more of these, and they should be coming tomorrow. I really enjoy them. I'll pop a link for Woolly Tangle down below. It's not affiliate or anything. I really liked them, and I've got some of my stitch markers attached here. These are some of my Jane Eyre stitch markers that came. So I've been using them in this project. So before I talk about this project, my final work in progress, I want to start by talking about the yarn. Let me just grab an unused ball of yarn. So the yarn that I got is from Black Sheep Wools, and they were running a sale a few weeks ago on luxury yarns. And I said to my partner the other day I have a lot of yarn, but I have a lot of yarn where I have like 20 different colours of one yarn. Like say a cotton or a merino or whatever for colourful crochet projects like blankets. But I don't have sweater quantities of yarn. So I've been buying yarn. Even though my stash is giant and I don't have space for it, I've been buying more yarn because I want to make, one of my goals for 2024 was to make handmade wardrobe items, so sweaters, cardigans, t-shirts, etc. And knitting and crochet mainly, but I also am going to try sewing later in the year. So I want a handmade wardrobe essentially. So I've started that, and I've started hoarding yarn when it's been on sale for sweaters. So I don't have quantities that I can make a jumper or a cardigan from. So anyways, saying that, there was a luxury yarn sale on Black Sheep Wools a few weeks ago, and they had a load of Rowan yarns on sale, and I was looking through and I was like, oh, none of these. And then this one caught my eye because the two colours it's in are like my favourite colours, pale pink and a golden browny gold yellow colour. So they were both my colours, so I couldn't resist. And I looked at reviews of this yarn on Ravelry, and they were all like, for a mohair, this is really soft. So I've never really been able to wear mohair because I find it quite prickly fibre to wear. But the reviews for this was it's really soft for a mohair. So I was like, my skin's, I said in my last podcast, my skin sensitivity has changed. It's not as sensitive as it used to be. So maybe I'll try mohair. So I bought some Rowan patina yarn, and it's a what is it? So it's 46% mohair, 24% nylon, 20% wool and 10% polyester. So it's a fluffy mohair double knit yarn, but with a little something special. Can you see all that glitter? It's kind of shimmery. It's got like sparkle in there. So this shade is called Old Gold. And then I bought 5 balls of, so it's 250 meters per 50 grams, and it's double knit weight, but because it's like fluffy, I'm knitting it at a looser gauge. And then, so I bought 5 balls of this to make a jumper, which is my work in progress that I'll show you in a minute. And this is the other colour, this is confetti. Now, I am a millennial, I'm 32, and my favourite colour is millennial pink, that really soft pink, like the pink of my jumper, which is not a handmade jumper, it's a bought jumper. So yeah, it's that soft pink colour, which also has that golden, it has gold sparkle in it as well. I don't know if you can see it, and can you kind of see that halo, how fluffy it is? But it is soft, there's no prickle, it doesn't feel irritating at all, it just feels soft and fluffy, and I really, really love it. I really love the squish factor, I love it on a ball. It's a to knit with. I don't know if I can say that, but it's not fun to knit with, but the fabric it makes, it's lovely. So yeah, so I got 5 balls of this to make a jumper and 7 balls of this to make a cardigan, but I didn't have patterns in mind. So I did some swatches. I'll show you my swatches that I did. So the first one I did is the gold I plan to hold double with some Rialto lace that I've shown before that I'm struggling to find a project for. So that's it held double with a lace weight merino. You can kind of see that it's a slightly different yellow colour. That doesn't really come across as 2 different yarns. If I bring that closer, maybe you can see. Yeah, so there's 2 different yarns in that. I didn't really like this swatch. So then I knitted some of the pink this time up, and I think this is on 6mm needles, but it might be 5. I can't remember. I started this project a few weeks ago. I did these swatches a couple of weeks ago, so there it is knitted up. You can just kind of see that sparkle. So it's quite floaty and airy and lace. And then the recommended needle size for this yarn is 4mm because it's labelled as a double knit. It's a bit thinner than a double knit. It's more like a sport, I'd say, but with that fluffy halo, it's a double knit. So I tried, I can't remember, this is 4mm needles and 4.5mm needles. So that's a bit less airy. I don't know if you can see, bring it a bit closer. So it's still quite an airy fabric that it makes, but it's so soft. It's so horrible to knit with though, because it's so sticky, and I usually use metal needles, but I'm using wooden needles for it because I need to, because otherwise it just slips off. And then I even tried crocheting granny square in it, just to see what it was like. I think it looks like the granny square is a bit worn. Like, it doesn't really, I don't think it looks great crocheted up. So yeah, so I'm gonna knit a jumper and a cardigan from this. I'm probably gonna leave the cardigan until autumn, save the pink yarn in my stash till autumn. But I have started the jumper. So the jumper that I'm making is a super popular pattern on Ravelry, and I've been really curious to try this pattern because it's like, I think it's one of the most popular sweater patterns on Ravelry. It's got like tens of thousands of projects on Ravelry, and I'm sure if you're a knitter or you've been watching knit podcasts, you will have seen this pattern before. So this is the Ranunculus sweater by, what's her name? I'm really bad, my memory is really bad today. I'll put her name on the screen. So this is the Ranunculus sweater, and it is worked top down. It's a circular yoke that turns into a raglan, and it's really adaptable. Like, there's a lot of cotton versions of this. It's a really adaptable pattern, and it's such a good pattern. Like, I understand the hype now. I understand why this is such a widely used pattern, and there's so many projects, because it's so clear, and the way that she writes it is really clear, with these little diagrams to show you what you're doing, and these little mini videos to show you if you've never done that increase before. I've learned so many new things just learning this. I did my first ever tubular cast on, so if you can see, my ribbon goes around the top edge, so a tubular cast on. It was magic. Like, how does doing some yarn overs and then knitting them turn into ribbing? I don't know, it was magic. So yeah, so I followed the tubular cast on, and then there's this circular yoke with all of these sort of like lacy textured stitches around the yoke, and then it turns, and up to the bottom of the yoke, every size is that pattern. And then the way that she does the different sizes is, we've got some raglan increases for the sleeve here. I don't know if you can see my line of increases down there to get to the different sizes, and my gauge is a little bit tighter than the pattern, so I've made a couple of sizes up. I think I'm making a 7 or an 8. I don't think I'm following a size at this point because I'm just knitting straight now. So yeah, so I've chosen to do long sleeves. I learned some really interesting increases that I've not done before as well for this, and then the sleeves I just knit straight. And then I did my cuffs a little bit differently. In the pattern, she's got some like diagonal short row shaping, which I'm not really sure why, at the bottom of the sleeves. There's probably a reason that's lost to me, but I just looked at the instructions, so I was like, nah. So I did, and then I looked at the instructions for the cuff, and the cuff is an I-cord bind off. I've never done an I-cord bind off before. I don't want to learn to do an I-cord bind off with this really difficult to knit yarn. It's just not very pleasant to knit with. So the cuff that I've done instead is I've done loads of decreases till I got my stitch count almost half to what it was to bring it right in. Then I did 5 rounds of half twisted rib and then just a normal bind off. It's quite a tight cuff because it needed it. So that's kind of the first change I've made to the pattern. And then I did start, because my hips are 6 inches wider than my bust, I did start doing A-line increases for my hips. However, I tried it on this morning and it doesn't need A-line increases. So I'm probably not going to do any more. I've done 2, so I'm not going to do any more increases. It doesn't need it. So yeah, so I finished this cuff this morning. So from the sort of like the cast on edge to where I've knit up to on the body, that was 2 50-gram skeins of yarn, and then the sleeve used half of a skein. So I think this jumper is only going to use 4 of my 5, which is 1,000 meters of yarn, which for a big girl to have a big oversized jumper, that's quite good value. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on so you can see, because the fit is beautiful. Okay, here it is. Look at the fit of this. Let me just stand up a little bit. Just look at the fit of that around my shoulders. I have quite narrow sloping shoulders, and I often get out too much fabric here, especially when I'm doing a circular yoke. I've only done circular yoke once though, so I just found that there was a lot of fabric sort of here, but for this it just fits perfectly. And then my raglan increases here, and then here is my sleeve on. It's like the perfect length. I added a couple of extra I finished the sleeve last night, tried it on, I was like, no, I need like 2 more inches. The reviews for this yarn on Ravelry said that this often widens and shortens this yarn with like wear and washing, so I've purposefully made the sleeves longer than I thought, and then I stretched it all out like this earlier, tried it on, and look at that balloon sleeve. Oh, I love it. I love the fabric. It's so floaty and airy. And let me just stand up a minute. It's just floaty. Like, it's so lightweight, but when it's on, it's warm. So yeah, so I've still got to knit this sleeve. That's what I'm going to do when I finish the podcast. I'm going to stick some TV on. And I'm going to pick up the stitches for this sleeve. And then, yeah, I've got the body. So maybe I'll have this finished by the next podcast. So I just put my clothes back on, and then we'll talk about the 5 sweaters that I'm planning on casting on. There are more than 5. I've got various yarns to show you, and I only have 32 minutes of storage left on my SD card, so that's my limit. So yeah, I'll just put my jumper back on and we'll start talking about yarn and knitted sweater patterns and all of that fun stuff. Okay, let's talk about the jumpers, cardigans, sweaters that I want to knit, because I've been knit-fluenced. I've been watching so many knitting podcasts. I've been influenced to buy yarn and patterns and all sorts. So the first yarn that I picked up was in January, and this is More Pink Fluff. More Pink Fluff. So hopefully that will focus in on that. There we go. So this is from Hedgerow Yarns. This is a hand-dyed Suri alpaca yarn. It is, let me just read So it is her Suri Silk Cloud base, 65% baby Suri alpaca, 35% mulberry silk. It's a 50 gram skein and has 400 meters, so it's a lace weight yarn. I picked up 4 of these, so I've got 1600 meters. When I've been looking at patterns, I found that long, because I don't really do cropped, so long jumpers with long sleeves for me require about 1600 meters of fingering or double knit weight yarn. So I got 1600 meters, knowing that I would hold this double. Like I said, I've been watching a lot of knitting podcasts and I've been influenced, and it seems to be a popular thing at the minute where you hold a strand of mohair with a yarn whilst you knit a garment and it makes it all fluffy. And I'm assuming it feels nice and luxurious, but I've never got on well with mohair. But I'd heard on these podcasts that alpaca is a good alternative for people that are sensitive to mohair. So yeah, I bought 4 skeins of this, planning to hold it double, but I really struggled to find a yarn that was sort of like the same millennial pink. I think this is actually called, it's got a name, yeah, this is actually called Smitten. This is her colour Smitten. And then more knitfluenced, I saw a lot of people using Filcolana yarns. So I found a website in the UK, Maple Tree Yarns, who stocks loads of Filcolana yarn. And it's actually reasonably priced. I was expecting, because lots of these people were making like these luxurious garments with mohair and spending loads of money on them. I was expecting it to be more expensive, but it wasn't. Like, it's actually pretty reasonably priced. So this is Filcolana Arvetta. It's their sock base and it's 8% superwash merino and 20% nylon. And look how good of a match that is actually. I have caked up, I've wound some of the yarn into cakes, so if I hold them together you can kind of see. So how good of a match is that? So this is a sock yarn and a lace weight yarn that I'm going to knit together, so that's a double knit yarn, so I need a double knitting pattern. I'm sorry, my cat is playing with a hairband. You know you're not allowed those. Sorry, my cat was trying to eat a headband. So by a headband I mean like a hair tie. That's what I've just taken off her because she was trying to eat it. So yeah, what was I saying? So yeah, so I'm going to hold this together for a double knitting weight sweater. I've found a few patterns that I quite like the look of. I was looking at the Stockholm sweater by Petite Knit. So this is a really popular pattern again as well. It's just like an all over stockinette sweater. I think it's drop shoulder with like a 1x1 doubled over, like folded over collar. Looks really simple, but I'm knitting the Ranunculus and that's got a lot of stockinette. And I don't know if it's because I'm knitting with that yarn that I don't like knitting with. I'm just not enjoying it as much as I do when I knit socks stockinette in the round. So I'm a bit wary about trying fluffy yarn stockinette again. I need something that's a bit more, I want to keep knitting it. So then I was looking at some texture patterns and I found that Ingrid, these are both really popular patterns on Ravelry. So the Ingrid sweater by Petite Knits, this has got like stripes of texture. I was also considering cable knit patterns. The one that I found that I quite like was the Front Porch sweater by, I can't remember the names. I'm just going to put all the names down below because I can't remember them and my brain's all over the place. So yes, then I was thinking cable knit, but I can't decide. I've made a swatch of these 2 yarns together in stockinette and I think I did a 4mm needle and a 4.5mm needle. So that's kind of what those 2 yarns look like together. If you can see the fluff. Oh, it's so soft. So soft. And the colour is just perfect. This is exactly what I wanted. This is exactly what I wanted and it's so drapey. Look at the drape on that. So drapey. It's going to be such a snuggly, fluffy, warm thing. Oops, I keep putting things on my neck and I've got my microphone here, so I'm sorry. In the last podcast, I kept banging a box against it, so I'm sorry. I'm still getting used to wearing a microphone and having a fancy camera, so I'm sorry. So yeah, so that fluffy swatch there. I don't know if you have any pattern suggestions that isn't just stockinette. Let me know down in the comments because I'm looking out for patterns. I found this really beautiful jumper with like cables down the arms. I can't remember what the name was. It was something to do with stars. I think it was like Ursa Major or something like that. I'll put it up on the screen with a little picture of the one that I found that I was considering, but the gauge is wrong. My gauge is, I think it's 20 stitches on 4mm needle, so it's 20 stitches across, and that pattern's 23, so it would be too dense for my yarn. So the one that I know I'm going to make, and I have the yarn and I'm definitely set on this pattern. So I've been watching the Craft knitting podcast with Rebecca and I've got 2 of her patterns that I'm planning to cast on really, really soon. So the first one is her Kerr sweater. I have knit colour work before, but I did it cotton for like a doll's dress like 10 years ago. I was really bad at it. I'm an English knitter, but I don't throw, I flick with a finger. If I get time, I'll put some footage in of how I knit. So I just don't like knitting colour work. But I found a video on YouTube that I'll link down below where as a flicker, I can literally hold both strands of yarn in one hand and just move my finger left or right. And that's the colour that I'm knitting with for the colour work. So yeah, I'm gonna knit the Kerr sweater, which is like stockinette to here, and then it has a band of colour work across the chest and the upper arms, and then it goes back to stockinette. So I'm going to use this for the main colour. It's a tweed yarn. It's called Serda Haworth Tweed. Haworth again, Bronte sisters. It's all named after like Yorkshire themed thing. Can you tell I love living in Yorkshire? So this is 50% organic merino and 50% nylon. And you can see it's this rusty, it comes across more orange on that screen. It's definitely like a reddy orange, almost like a tomato orange, but not so bright. It's like a soft tomato. Yeah, anyways, it's got these flecks of all these different colours in it because it's a tweed yarn. It's double knitting weight, and I'm going to hold that double with the same yarn in this colour. Oh, it looks cream on the screen. It is not cream. It looks cream in this light, to be fair. In sunlight, we're on artificial light here. In sunlight, this is like a pinky greyish colour, almost like a grey, and that's got flecks of orange and black in. This shade's called Yorkshire Stone. Like, Yorkshire Stone is not pinky grey, it's like a yellowy beige. This is wrongly named. Anyway, so those are the two colours. So I'm going to use that as the main colour and that as the contrast. And I'm so excited to start knitting this. I'm tempted to cast this on before I finish my ranunculus, but I've told myself I need to finish the ranunculus before I cast it on. I don't know if I've got the self-control to not cast this on, because it's basically stockinette for a while and then I can learn how to do colour work. So I haven't done any practice. I'm just like, yeah, I'm just going to knit a colour work sweater. If I have to drop it and pick it up and drop it and pick it up, it's fine. I really love the look of colour work sweaters, so that's what I'm going to do. I've just noticed my battery's about to die, so I'll just do a really quick change. Okay, I've just changed the battery. I think we'd finished with that. So the Kerr sweater by Rebecca Clow. I want to knit all of her designs. They're all beautiful. I'm definitely going to be, I'll talk about the other one I'm going to be definitely casting on in 2024, and that's the Egwene Cardigan. It doesn't use very much yarn, and it's like a mesh lace cardigan with different neck and sleeve length options. I'll put a picture up, and for that I'm going to use Drops Extra Fine Merino in colour 26, which I think is called Pistachio. So it's a bit brighter on screen than it actually is. It's kind of like a light soft green. I actually bought this maybe a year ago because I planned to do a granny square blanket with the squares edged in pale green, but that never materialised. I don't think it's going to materialise, and I've got like 11 balls of this in my stash, and I think they're about 100 metres. So it's extra fine merino, it's double knit weight, and it's 105 metres per 50 grams. So I've got 1,050, I've definitely got 10, I might have 11. So I've got about 1,000 metres of this. So that's not enough to make a full jumper or a cardigan out of, but it is enough for the Egwene Cardigan because it's on a loose gauge, so it doesn't use very much yarn. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this, and I think this green will be really good in spring and early summer to wear with like a floral dress. I love wearing floral dresses with a cardigan. So this is the cardigan I'm going to make. I'm going to make a Egwene Cardigan in green. So we've talked about, well, there are a couple of patterns for the pale pink yarn. I'm definitely going to be knitting the Kerr with those other two colours because I saw the pattern, yes, that's the one I want to make. Then I was like, right, these are the colours that I want, and I want tweed. So I went looking for tweed yarn, and that's what I settled on. But this is stash busting. This is a stash busting project. And then the other patterns that I want to knit, they are from Fable Knitwear, so the same as my cardigan earlier, but these are some of her more sort of feminine retro inspired knits. So the first one is the Minerva cardigan. So this is a beautiful cardigan with these puff sleeves, and I want to knit it not in red like her sample, but I want to knit it in a burgundy, and I ordered some hand-dyed yarn. So there was a lot of January sales from hand dyers. So this is Giddy Aunt Yarns. I've used her yarn before. I think one of her yarn, I've got one of her minis in my blanket that I talked about earlier. So this is, so when I probably should have like looked at the pictures a little bit more, but I ordered this thinking it was going to be like a red burgundy colour, which is what I've got in my head. I love wearing burgundy with this pink. I love it. I think I've got a cardigan in it, and I just love the combination of burgundy and pale pink. And then I ordered this and it came and it was purple. I thought it was burgundy and it's like a deep purple. I actually really like this colour, but not for that pattern. So I am going to knit that pattern, but I'm still on the lookout for a deep red burgundy. I've got 16 minutes left on my SD card to finish filming this podcast. I can't believe we've been talking this long. So this purple yarn. So I'm on the lookout for a pattern for this. It's a sport weight yarn. It's 300 meters per 100 grams, and it's 100% superwash merino, and it's an oddball, it's not one of her regular colours, it's an oddball colour that she's just come up with. So I really like it. It's this deep purple. I've ordered some slightly lighter purple mohair, and that's going to be my first foray into mohair. I'm going to hold mohair double with this. I literally ordered this just before I started the podcast because it's been on sale on Wool Warehouse, and I keep going and looking back at it. It's Rowan Kid Silk Haze in the colour Mulberry. It's been discontinued, so it's been on sale. So I've bought 1200 metres of that to go with my 1200 metres of this. And I think I'm going to knit a Lento sweater in it. I've been knit-fluenced again for the Lento pattern, so it's the same gauge as the Ranunculus. That's a 6mm needle, so it's got quite an open fabric. And the Lento has the same gauge, and it's just a top-down raglan 3/4 length sleeve jumper, and my size it uses, I can't remember, I think it's about 1100 meters, I can't remember, but I should have enough for it with that. So that's going to be cast on. I'm not 100% set on that pattern though, and I wrote all of this down, but I've got a mess around me of yarn and projects. I've just flung stuff on the floor when I finished talking about it. So I don't know where my list has gone with all of the designer names. So Lento is designed by, I'll put it on the screen, or I did put it on the screen earlier. So yeah, the Lento, but I'm not fully set on it. I'm open to knitting something else with this plus that mohair, and I'm going to wait to buy the pattern until I've got that mohair and I've done a swatch with this, with the mohair, and I'm happy with that combination, and I'm going to knit with it. So the other projects I don't have yarn here for. The other projects I'm planning on casting on. I've got a crocheted cardigan that I'm planning on making once it's my next crochet my next crochet project once I've got further along in the Yorkshire blanket, and that is the Granny Go Round cardigan by Claudine from Iron Lamb. I'm just going to say that. Yeah, and I'm going to do that in, so I've got lots of Drops Baby Cash Merino in stash from when I was like hoarding it to make a blanket. I showed the blanket in a couple of podcast episodes back. It's like a hexagon blanket in 24 different shades of Debbie Bliss Baby Cash Merino. So I've got loads of colours of that, and then I've ordered this yarn again, but not in this colour. I've ordered it in light beige, so the same sort of colour as that cardigan. And then I'm going to go like beige colour, beige colour, beige colour, and hopefully that'll be a bit more wearable for me, because I crocheted a really colourful patchwork cardigan, the Sisterhood cardigan, and I don't want to wear it because it feels too colourful for me. I don't know if I just need to get used to wearing brighter colours, but I find when I wear too many colours, it makes me look really pale and washed out. I've got really pale skin, and I just think bright colours make me look washed out. So I'm hoping by mixing in the beige in there, it will sort of soften them. But I'll maybe show that yarn combination in the next podcast episode. And then I think that was, have I shared my 5 patterns? Oh yeah, the other pattern is Forest Berries by Fable Knitwear. That was the other one that I want to cast on. It's very similar to the Minerva cardigan, but it's got like this textured panels down the front that are like berries with bobble stitches, and I just love it. And she knit one in like beige, but I kind of want to knit one in like, not this colour again, but like more of a bluey sage green is what I was thinking for that. Or maybe that could be a contender for the Forest Berries, but I don't know if, because this is such a dark colour, if the texture would show up. So Yeah, and then the last yarn I've bought was a dud. So again, I was knitfluenced by Rebecca Clow of Create Better Knits. I'll link her podcast down below because I've been binge watching. And she was talking about, she ran a cone along a couple of years ago, and I was watching the backdated episode, and I was like, oh wow, the jumper that she's wearing, it was this beautiful gold and yellow, and it was textured. And she was like, oh, I held some mohair double with this yarn, and it's like 100% British yarn. It's quite rustic, but I find it quite soft, and I was 100% knitfluenced. And I thought, when I ordered this yarn, it was going to be a golden yellow, a bit like the yellow of that sunflower blanket behind me. It was going to be golden yellow because I would love a golden yellow jumper. I would love it. I don't even care like what pattern I use. I just want a golden yellow jumper. I love yellow. I don't wear it very much, and I love it. So I want to knit one. And I was like, oh, that yarn you've used is beautiful. It's like this golden yellow. So I ordered it, and it comes in these 500-gram cones of like lace weight wool that you hold double to get a double knit gauge. And I ordered it the same colour called Harvest, thinking I was going to get the golden yellow just like her, but obviously hers is a couple of years ago, and they've changed the colour since then. It's baby poo green. Yes, baby poo doesn't always look like this colour, but that's the colour that I opened it and I was like, that's not the colour I was expecting. It's just not right. And I bought 2 cones of this. I've got 5,000 metres of this yarn. I was going to hold 3 strands double, like together, to be fair. So it's more like 1,600 metres. So I was going to hold 3 strands together. But, like, I don't know if any of you have, when you've watched my previous podcast, I think I said in the first one, I used to be a midwife, and then before that I was a healthcare assistant in a children's hospital, so I've changed a lot of babies' nappies in my life. And this is baby poo green. So I can't wear it. I held it to myself and it's baby poo. So I don't know what I'm going to do with this 5,000 metres of yarn. Like, I've seen people knit in this and it's like an olive green, and for some people, especially people that have got like blonde hair, I think this looks quite good on, but I don't think it looks good on me, and I just can't get it out of my head. I tried swatching it. That was 3 strands held double. It looks really yellow on camera. Maybe that's the problem. It looks yellow on camera, but in real life it's green. And it's not a nice green. Sorry, I'm a little bit frustrated. That looks golden yellow on camera, and it's not yellow, I promise you, it's green. So yeah, it's just, yeah, that looks lovely golden yellow on, well, not lovely, it's still golden yellow on camera, but yeah, so that's 3 strands knitted together. It's quite a rustic, it's 100% British wool from woollyknit.com, their yarn to cone. I ordered some shade cards for their cotton and their merino as well, so I might try their merino looks nice. Now I've got shade cards, I know I won't have this problem again. And that was 2 strands held together in a swatch. So if anyone is in West Yorkshire and wants to do a yarn swap for 5,000 metres of a lovely golden olive yarn, hit me up, because I don't want this. I don't want to sell it online because they're 500-gram cones. This is a kilo of yarn. I don't want to post a kilo of yarn to somebody. So, kilo of yarn. Oh, I'm actually quite glad I didn't use this for a jumper now. I've realised it was a kilo of yarn. So yeah, if you want this yarn, hit me up. So yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed on that, ending on a disappointment. So now we've finished talking about everything, I usually say goodbye and I'll see you next time. But there's some exciting things happening in my life at the minute. So the day that this video goes live is the 1st of March, and we are picking up the keys to the house that we have bought. It's a standard 3-bed semi-detached house in the UK, so I'm getting the box room as a craft room. So there probably won't be a podcast episode in March, because we're going to be moving sort of the 3rd week of March, we think, at the minute. We've got a bit of an overlap between our rental and our house move. So yeah, I'm probably not going to be putting up a podcast in March, but what I am going to start doing in April is doing some vlogs of me setting up my craft room, sorting out my yarn. I'm going to do some giveaways. I've got a sponsored giveaway coming up as well with lots of yarny goodness. So yeah, there's some exciting things happening for Meema Makes, but I think I'll make a separate video because I've got not very much space left on my SD card. So I'll put up a video in a week or two's time with all of the exciting things that I have planned for Meema Makes and some changes that are coming to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. So I just wanted to show you what's left after I finish filming a podcast. I just throw it all on the floor and around. There's all crap everywhere. So yeah, I've now got to go and tidy all of this up.